You've been chasing something your entire life: happiness, success, love, the next achievement, the next relationship, the next purchase, the next experience, always the next thing. And every time you get it, something strange happens. The satisfaction lasts for a moment, maybe a day, maybe a week, then it fades, and the wanting returns, stronger than before, more desperate, more exhausting. What if I told you this isn't a problem with you? What if this endless cycle of desire and disappointment isn't something you're doing wrong? What if it's the fundamental structure of human existence itself? What if the very nature of being alive is to want, to suffer, to be temporarily satisfied, and then to want again forever, until you die? Arthur Schopenhauer figured this out 200 years ago. He looked at human life and saw something that most philosophers were too afraid to admit, that life is essentially suffering, not because something went wrong, not because we're being punished, but because that's what life is. The will to live is the will to want, and wanting is suffering. This sounds devastating. It sounds like the most pessimistic philosophy imaginable, and in some ways, it is. But here's what nobody tells you about Schopenhauer. He didn't stop at the diagnosis. He found ways through. He discovered states of being where the endless wanting stops, where peace is possible, where the torture machine of desire finally falls silent. If you're depressed right now, if you're exhausted by the endless chase, if you're starting to suspect that no achievement will ever be enough, then you need to hear what Schopenhauer discovered. Because understanding the hidden truth about suffering is the first step towards something that might actually be called peace. Stay with me for the next 20 minutes. This is going to be dark, but there's light on the other side. Before we continue, I need to ask you something uncomfortable. Think about the last time you got something you really wanted. A promotion, a relationship, a purchase, an achievement. How long did the satisfaction last? A week, a month, and then what happened? Did the wanting come back? Did a new desire appear before the old one was even cold? Leave a comment with your experience. Because if you've noticed this pattern, you've already glimpsed what Schopenhauer spent his life understanding. Arthur Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in Danzig, Prussia, into a wealthy merchant family. His father was a successful businessman who wanted Arthur to follow in his footsteps. His mother was a novelist and socialite who, after her husband's death, became famous in her own right for her salons and her writing. From the beginning, Schopenhauer was difficult. Brilliant, but difficult. He had no patience for commerce, for social niceties, for the things normal people seem to value. He wanted to understand existence itself. He wanted to know why life was the way it was. His father died when Arthur was 17, likely by suicide, throwing himself into a canal near their warehouse. The exact circumstances remain unclear, but the possibility of suicide haunted Schopenhauer. It planted a question. If life is good, if existence is worth living, why would anyone choose to end it? His mother, freed from her unhappy marriage, flourished. She moved to Weimar, became part of the literary scene, befriended Goethe. Arthur remained outside, looking in, unable to connect. His mother eventually wrote him a letter telling him not to visit, that his pessimism and critical nature were too exhausting to bear. He never saw her again. This biographical information matters, because Schopenhauer developed a philosophy that matched his experience. He didn't create pessimism from abstract reasoning. He recognized pessimism from living, the rejection by his mother, the probable suicide of his father, the observation that even successful, wealthy, intellectually gifted people seemed fundamentally unsatisfied. He looked at the world and asked, why is everyone suffering? Why does no one seem genuinely content? Why do those with everything still want more? And he found his answer in a concept he called the will. The will, for Schopenhauer, is not just human willpower. It's the fundamental nature of reality itself. Everything that exists is a manifestation of this blind, purposeless, insatiable striving. The rock falls because of the will. The plant grows toward light because of the will. The animal hunts and reproduces because of the will. And humans want again forever because of the will. The will has no goal. It doesn't want anything in particular. It just wants. It's pure desiring, pure striving, pure need. And it can never be satisfied because satisfaction would mean the end of willing, and the will cannot stop. It is existence itself. This is why, Schopenhauer argued, life is suffering, not because of specific problems that could be fixed, but because life itself is endless wanting, and wanting is painful. The wanting hurts, And the brief satisfaction when we get what we want is just the temporary absence of that particular want, immediately replaced by new wants. Think about it. When you're hungry, you suffer. When you eat, the suffering briefly stops, but then you digest, and hunger returns. When you're lonely, you suffer. When you find connection, the loneliness briefly stops. But then you need more connection or fear losing it, and the suffering returns in a new form. This is the wheel of Ixion that Schopenhauer described: perpetual rotation, momentary relief followed by renewed torment, forever. Let me ask you directly, does this describe your experience? The endless cycle of wanting, getting, briefly being satisfied, then wanting something else. The feeling that you're on a treadmill that never stops. The exhaustion of always needing the next thing to feel okay. Because if it does, Schopenhauer would say you're not broken. You're not doing something wrong. You're seeing life clearly. And that clarity, as painful as it is actually the beginning of wisdom. If this is resonating with you, if you're starting to see your depression as something other than random malfunction, I need you to do something now. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Not for vanity, but because this understanding could help others trapped in the same cycle without knowing why. And what comes next is where Schopenhauer offers actual relief. Schopenhauer's analysis gets darker before it offers light. He examined what he called the pendulum of life. Life, he said, swings between pain and boredom. When we want something and don't have it, we suffer the pain of unsatisfied desire. When we get what we want, the desire is extinguished, and we experience boredom. So we create new desires to escape the boredom, which creates new pain when those desires are unsatisfied. Back and forth, pain, boredom, forever. The wealthy person who has everything still suffers, because having everything means having nothing to want, which is boredom, which is its own form of suffering. So they create artificial wants, luxuries, hobbies, affairs, dramas, anything to feel the wanting again, anything to escape the emptiness of satisfied desire. The poor person suffers the pain of unsatisfied basic needs. If they become wealthy, they briefly escape that pain, only to discover the suffering of the wealthy, the boredom, the meaninglessness, the desperate search for new desires. There is no escape through achievement. There is no escape through acquisition. There is no escape through relationship. Every exit is an entrance to a new room of suffering. This is the hidden truth about depression that Schopenhauer understood. Depression is often not a malfunction. It's a clear perception of reality. It's what happens when the illusions that kept you chasing, that kept you believing the next thing would make you happy, finally break down. The depressed person often sees what the happy person is too distracted to notice, that the whole game is rigged, that satisfaction is always temporary, that the finish line keeps moving, that life is, in some fundamental sense, a trick we play on ourselves to keep going. This is why, paradoxically, Schopenhauer's pessimism can be comforting to depressed people. It confirms what they already suspect. It tells them they're not crazy, not weak, not defective. They're just seeing clearly, and there's validation in that. But Schopenhauer didn't stop there. If he had, his philosophy would be pure despair. Instead, he found ways out of the trap. The first escape Schopenhauer identified is aesthetic contemplation. When we experience true art, when we lose ourselves in music or painting or literature or natural beauty, something remarkable happens. The will goes quiet. Desire stops. We are no longer wanting creatures. We become pure perceiving. Think about the last time you were truly absorbed in a piece of music. The last time a sunset made you forget everything. The last time a book transported you completely. In those moments, did you want anything? Did you suffer? Or were you, for those brief moments, simply present, simply experiencing, without the torture of desire? This is what Schopenhauer called the aesthetic state. It's temporary, he admitted. The will always returns. But while it lasts, it offers a glimpse of peace, a momentary release from the prison of wanting. This is why art matters, not as entertainment, not as status symbol, but as genuine salvation. A few moments of freedom from the will, scattered throughout a life of suffering. It's not much, but it's something. Second question for you. When was the last time you were so absorbed in something that you forgot yourself, that wanting stopped, that you were simply present without past regrets or future anxieties? What was it? Art, nature, music, flow state in work or sport? Write your experience in the comments, because identifying these moments is crucial. They're your escape hatches, your temporary releases from the prison, But aesthetic contemplation is temporary. The moment ends and the will returns. Schopenhauer knew this wasn't enough. His second, more radical escape is the denial of the will through asceticism, through the deliberate reduction of desire, through what he saw in Eastern philosophy, particularly Buddhism and Hinduism. Here's his reasoning. If suffering comes from wanting, then reducing wanting reduces suffering. If desire is the source of pain, then the path to peace is not more achievement but less desire. This is completely contrary to everything modern culture teaches. We're told to want more, achieve more, acquire more, experience more. Schopenhauer says, want less, need less, detach from the endless cycle of desire and disappointment. He admired the ascetics, the monks, the renunciates of the world, not because suffering itself is good, but because they had found a way off the wheel. By progressively reducing their attachment to worldly things, they reduced their suffering. By wanting nothing, they approached something like peace. Now, most of us are not going to become monks. Schopenhauer himself didn't become a monk. He lived comfortably, enjoyed good food and music, had his pleasures. But he understood the principle that every desire you can release is one less way the world can hurt you. This has practical applications for depression. How much of your suffering comes from wanting things you can't have? How much comes from comparing yourself to others? How much comes from needing external validation? How much comes from the gap between your life as it is and your life as you think it should be? Every one of those desires is a hook the world has in you. Every one is a way you can be pulled and manipulated and hurt. What if you could release some of them? Not through suppression or pretending you don't care, but through genuinely seeing that their satisfaction wouldn't bring lasting peace anyway. This is the hidden gift of Schopenhauer's pessimism. Once you truly understand that no achievement will bring lasting satisfaction, you can stop killing yourself to achieve. Once you see that the game is rigged, you can stop playing so desperately. Once you recognize the trick, you can take a breath. Schopenhauer's third escape, and perhaps the most profound, is compassion. Wait, you might think, this philosopher of pessimism is talking about compassion. Yes, because Schopenhauer understood that the illusion of separation is part of our suffering. We think we're isolated individuals competing against other isolated individuals. We think their success diminishes us, and their failure elevates us. We're trapped in the ego, in the narrow perspective of I and mine. But the will is one. It manifests in you and in me and in every living creature. Your suffering and my suffering are at the deepest level the same suffering. The will tortured into countless forms, all of them wanting, all of them hurting. When you truly see this, something shifts. The boundaries of the ego become transparent. You recognize yourself in others. Their pain becomes your pain, not as burden, but as connection. Their joy becomes your joy. This is what Schopenhauer called the basis of true morality. Not rules imposed from outside, not divine commands, just the simple recognition that we are all in this together, all manifestations of the same blind striving, all suffering the same fundamental predicament. Compassion, then, is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's seeing clearly. And it provides its own form of release from the isolated ego that makes depression so painful. Third question, and this one goes deep. When did you last feel genuinely connected to another person's suffering, not in a way that drained you, but in a way that somehow made your own suffering more bearable? When did shared pain transform into something almost like comfort? Because if you've experienced this, you know something that many people never learn. Connection doesn't eliminate suffering, but it changes suffering from isolation into communion, and that change makes all the difference. Let me address something important. Schopenhauer has been called the philosopher of pessimism, and he wore that label proudly. But pessimism doesn't mean what most people think. Optimism, in the philosophical sense, says this is the best of all possible worlds. Pessimism says this is the worst of all possible worlds, and any slight change would make it impossible. These are extreme metaphysical positions, not just attitudes. But practically, Schopenhauer's pessimism leads to something surprising, a kind of peace. Because once you accept that life is fundamentally suffering, you stop being shocked and outraged when you suffer. You stop asking, why me? Because the answer is obvious, because you exist. Existence is suffering, it's not personal. This is incredibly liberating for depressed people. So much of depression is the secondary suffering of being depressed. The shame, the sense that something is wrong with you, the exhausting effort to be happy when you're not. Schopenhauer removes that burden. You're not failing at life. Life is like this. Everyone is suffering, even the ones who hide it well. Schopenhauer was also one of the first Western philosophers to take Eastern philosophy seriously. He read the Upanishads and called them the consolation of his life. He recognized in Buddhism a kindred understanding of suffering and the path beyond it. The Buddha's first noble truth is that life is dukkha, usually translated as suffering, but more precisely meaning unsatisfactoriness, the sense that something is always off, always missing, always not quite right. Schopenhauer arrived at essentially the same insight from a completely different direction. The Buddha's analysis of suffering as arising from craving, from attachment, from the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion, maps directly onto Schopenhauer's analysis of the will, and the Buddhist path of reducing attachment, cultivating compassion, and finding the stillness beyond desire is precisely what Schopenhauer recommended. If you want to go deeper into these ideas, if Schopenhauer's philosophy resonates, but you want practical techniques, Buddhist psychology offers exactly that. Meditation, mindfulness, the systematic training of attention and attitude that can actually reduce the grip of the will. Before we conclude, I want to share something about how Schopenhauer lived, because philosophers should be judged not just by their ideas, but by their lives. He was not a happy man in the conventional sense. He was prickly, argumentative, difficult. He quarreled with colleagues. He pushed his landlady downstairs during an argument and had to pay her a pension for life. He lived alone with only a series of poodles for consistent companionship. But by his own account, he had peace. He had his work, his music, his books. He had the satisfaction of understanding. He found beauty where he could and accepted suffering where he couldn't. He lived to 72 in an age when that was old, and he died peacefully, his philosophy complete, his work done. Was he happy? Probably not in the way self-help books promise happiness. But he was reconciled. He had made peace with the nature of existence. He had found meaning not in fighting against reality, but in understanding it. That might be the most any of us can hope for. So what do you do with all this? How does Schopenhauer help you if you're depressed right now? First, stop blaming yourself. Depression is not a personal failure. It may be a clear perception of the nature of existence. You're not broken. You're seeing something true. Second, release the illusion that the next achievement will make you happy. It won't. Nothing will permanently. This is not cause for despair. It's freedom from the exhausting chase. You can stop running so hard. Third, find your aesthetic escapes. Music, art, nature, beauty, whatever, stops the wanting for you, even briefly. These are not frivolous. They are survival. They are the temporary exits from the prison. Use them. Fourth, reduce your desires where you can. Not through forced suppression, but through genuine understanding that their satisfaction won't bring lasting peace. Every attachment you release is one less way you can be hurt. Fifth, cultivate compassion. For others, yes, but also for yourself. You are one manifestation of the universal will, suffering as all manifestations suffer. Be gentle with yourself. You didn't create this predicament. You're just living in it. Sixth, accept that some suffering is inevitable. Stop fighting the fact that life hurts. That fight just adds more suffering to the suffering. Radical acceptance is not giving up. It's giving up the exhausting war against reality. Before you go, I need you to do something. If Schopenhauer has given you a new way of seeing your depression, share this video with someone who needs it, someone who thinks they're broken, someone who doesn't understand why nothing seems to work, someone who needs to know that their clear-sightedness about life's difficulty is not weakness, but vision. And subscribe to this channel. We're exploring ideas that can actually help with the deep problems, not just the surface ones. Arthur Schopenhauer died in 1860, largely ignored during his lifetime, only finding fame in his final years. After his death, his influence exploded. Nietzsche, Freud, Wagner, Wittgenstein, Tolstoy, Borges, all acknowledged their debt to him. His unflinching examination of suffering, of desire, of the nature of the will, opened doors that are still being walked through. He gave us permission to acknowledge what we often secretly feel, that life is hard in ways that can't be fixed, that wanting never stops, that satisfaction is always temporary. But he also gave us something more. He showed that understanding suffering is itself a form of relief. That aesthetic beauty offers moments of genuine peace. That compassion connects us across the isolation of individual existence, that wanting less might be more valuable than having more. You are alive. that means you will suffer. Schopenhauer does not pretend otherwise, but within this suffering, there are islands, moments of beauty, flashes of understanding, connections that briefly pierce the veil of separation, the quiet that comes when desire, for just a moment, falls silent. These are not nothing. They may be everything that matters. In the end, Schopenhauer offers not the cure for depression, but something more honest. The recognition that depression is often a reasonable response to existence, and the mapping of whatever limited escapes exist. That might not sound like much, but if you've been depressed, if you've been told to just cheer up, just be positive, just try harder, then you know how valuable it is to have someone say, I see why you're suffering. Anyone would suffer. Life is like this. And from that recognition, something strange can happen. The secondary suffering falls away. The shame dissolves. The exhausting effort to be what you're not can finally stop. What remains is just life, wanting and suffering, and occasional beauty, and inevitable death. It's not what we were promised, but it's what we have, and somehow seeing it clearly, accepting it fully, creates its own strange peace. Schopenhauer found that peace. Maybe you can too.